Remember that concept one demo was all about, like, they had this electromagnetic filter that
Yep.
allowed you to show and hide the camera.
Well, I watched
And
the
I was like,
entire video after you sent it, but yeah.
oh God.
Electrochromatic glass can take any of these forms, thanks to the application of an electric charge between the two sheets of super thin substrate.
No, that's so embarrassing. I didn't
No, it's
even know
great.
that I did that VO. I was like,
Yeah.
I forgot. I don't do content very much anymore. And I was like, oh shit, I actually did that. Hello and welcome to the Android Police Podcast. My name is Daniel Bader. This week on the show, I am so thrilled to have somebody who I have respected and whose content I've enjoyed for many years. She is a self-titled tech creator. We just confirmed this right before we started recording. She's a journalist. She is formerly a video producer at The Verge and currently newly launched her own thing on YouTube and the internet. Becca Farsace, welcome to the Android Police Podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's Friday morning, so the thing we normally do when we record on a Friday morning is to talk a little bit about the week. How do we feel about that? How's your week been so far?
It's been a weird week because I mostly live north of New York City in the middle of the woods. And this week I spent down in New York City. And that's always weird for me. A lot of people to see, a lot of events to get to. It's a whole different hustle and grind. So this really has nothing to do with tech, but it has a lot to do with like where my mind's been at. So yeah, it's been busy. It's a grind down here. But I'm
Yeah,
also
it
currently
feels like
working
it.
on, yeah, it does. Oh my God. But I'm currently working on my iPhone 16 Pro camera review. And I
Mm-hmm.
really took my time with it. I've been using the device for like, oh my gosh, almost 3 weeks now. And the whole goal of my phone camera coverage is usually to take 1,000 photos and videos. And sometimes I really struggle to get to that. Man, I'm like nearing 2,000 on this device at this point. And for a while, the story wasn't finding me. And I was starting to be like, is this device boring like a lot of folks have said? And then it hit me this week, which has been really great. So I've been deep diving into the edit on that, and it should launch next week. So, oh,
When
how's
you
your week been?
say my week has been good. I have two young kids, and I've been
Mm,
going through it a little bit with both of them in very different ways. My son is 2, and he is just like a full toddler. It was Rosh Hashanah this week, so we went for a family dinner, and it was like he just doesn't like big crowds yet. And my wife and I really kind of were hoping this would be the year that we would be able to just like bring our family to a family event and just let the
yeah,
kids run and play and not have to worry about them because there's so many other kids in the house. And
yeah,
it didn't happen that way, and we left just feeling really exhausted and sad that this year wasn't the year.
yeah.
And
Interesting.
it got me thinking, like, there are all of these long-term things that we are striving for. I'm striving for in my life, and I'm like very impatient for those things to happen. And this is my roundabout way of sort of coming to you and your career and what you've been going through over the last few weeks, months, and I'm sure years. But I want to just run back through the thing you said about the story. I think a lot of people, if they've watched your videos over the years, I think that essence comes through really well, is that you're not
Mm,
creating a tech video, you're creating a story about art, about self fulfillment and meditation and guidance through the form of technology. And when you say you were waiting for the story to find you, what does that mean, really? How do you find it eventually, or how does it find you? What does that spark for you?
yeah. Well, thanks for the kind words. I really appreciate that. I create everything in a little bubble and then I put it up on the internet and I never see people watching it. And so, you never know how it resonates with other folks. So I appreciate that insight. The story finding me, I mean, when you know this as a reviewer of sorts, like when you get a product, you like sit in a briefing and the PR company like tells you a story about the product that they want you to tell. Sometimes that story is true about a product, like, oh, it moves really quickly, so it helps me move through my life quicker. Okay, sure. But for me, I just get using it, and then there will be a feature or a problem or something I love that will just keep happening to me. And I start to notice that pattern in a product. So we can talk about the iPhone 16 Pro because that's what's on my mind right now. Nothing was happening. I was just having the same experience that I always have with an iPhone. And then I started like deep dive into like editing my photos. And I realized that
Mm,
this year for the iPhone, like the story it was starting to tell me was that I needed to put in far more work to make this device feel new. I needed
mm,
to edit my control center more. I needed to edit my photos and actually use photographic styles. I needed to plug in a hard drive and use the log settings. Like everything is just a little bit deeper, and so, kind of what I've come to about this device is that it's really on us this year. Whereas in historically Apple devices, they give you everything. It's already at your fingertips and it's easy and it comes to you naturally. And this device was far more about getting to know it.
right.
And that story just started to tell itself to me. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a little bit of magic. It's also a little bit of like just not thinking too much.
Does the story ever not come to you? Like,
Yeah,
have you ever published something and just been like, I just did the thing and got it over with, and I needed to put out a video, and that was it?
I mean, sure, 100%. And I think I can't remember a video right now because kind of when I finish a video, I close that book, I put it on a shelf, and then I usually
Sure.
don't think about it for a while. And I'm sure you can relate to this in
Yeah,
some way.
absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to hear how you deal with this as well. But there has definitely been products that come my way where I'm like, okay, this is just another pair of earbuds. But then that's the story in of itself. And then you dive into, okay, if it is just another pair of earbuds, how does it compare to all the other earbuds? And why did the company make this? And, this is being sold and like there was like tons of, thought behind this thing and why is that? And then that's kind of like the story, which is not nearly as fun to tell. But what about for you? What do you do in those situations?
I consider myself a literary guy. I come at everything from the perspective of what story do I want to tell? What characters do I want in this story? How much of myself do I want in this story? And I didn't used to be like that when I started in this industry. I was very much just like I wanted access, right? I wanted to have a seat at the table. I was a young guy. I just wanted to be invited to the event so that I could review the product, right? The HTC One was a beautiful metal phone that did a lot of cool things, and I didn't really think very much beyond that because the taking it out of my pocket, unlocking it and using it and then taking photos, that itself was sort of the reward. It was novel
Yeah.
in 2013 to do that with an iPhone 4S or an HTC One. And that isn't the case anymore, right? It's just there's a quotidian nature to using mobile technology. It happens almost subconsciously. It subsumes you and you subsume it, and there's this symbiotic relationship that you develop with the things. Even if you change phones and earbuds and watches every 2 weeks, it still feels like it's all part of the same continuum of process. And when I review something, I genuinely try to have something interesting to say, or I relate it to my own very kind of like niche experience as a parent in Canada who is trying to stay healthy and do all the things that a 40-year-old does. And like that may not be interesting to everybody, but I feel like if you know me and you listen to my voice on this podcast and you've developed a relationship with me over the last 15 years, there's a consistency to that I hope people like. And even though it's not going to get me an audience of, a million people, it's fine because the people that come to my content know what they're getting. And that's why I think people have resonated with your work so much, because it's similar that a Becca production is a wholly unique thing, even if it was within the confines of like the Verge's brand channel, and that has its own sort of style guide and whatnot. But like it was always this self-contained piece of art that I think people looked forward to, whether it was a video of a phone camera or a pair of earbuds, or you just like wandering around looking at stuff. Um,
Sometimes it is just wandering around and looking at stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Did you ever listen to Reply All, the podcast?
Yes, but like an episode here, an episode there. So I wouldn't be able to latch on
Okay.
to anything
So there
specifically,
was one
but lay it
episode,
on
like
me.
every episode that they produced had like a theme, a very direct, like they were answering a question or whatever, something tech related.
Yes.
But one
Yep.
episode in particular that I remember is just like them wandering around New York with microphones. And it was
Yep.
this day in the life thing where these two guys were just like walking around New York, and they put together this episode that's brilliant.
So where are you from?
The west of Ireland, guys.
How long have you been in the city?
18 years here now, guys.
And how long have you been how do you say it? Piloting?
Horse and carriage driver.
Horse and carriage
18
driver.
years as well, guys.
Wow.
Living the American dream. Looking at a horse's backside every day, guys.
It's not super crowded. It's kind of serene.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I felt this at peace.
And I guess I want this to come back to your experience with the iPhone, right? You're sort of in your new world as a tech creator, publishing on YouTube and putting yourself out there and guesting on podcasts. Thank you so much, by the way.
Oh my God. Thank you. I'm really stoked to be here.
What is that process like for you now? Like, has it changed since you've gone independent? What your iPhone 16 Pro camera review, like what does that look like to you now that you sort of have free reign to do whatever you want?
Yeah. I'm really newly into this. So I'm still figuring out so much of being independent and being on my own. Um, so I joke that like every week my answer to a question like this changes just a little bit as I get further from being at the Verge and being on my own. The iPhone is a unique product because it was one that I knew I would never be reviewing on my own at the Verge. And as I went into like the review process this year, like at the Verge, it was like, you're focusing on cameras. You can have an iPhone if you make a video just about its camera, and we'll give you the iPhone after we're all done with it. Cause you only get, 1 or 2 review units. So the iPhone is a unique product because I walked into it and I was like, whoa, I could review all parts of this phone now. But yet I've kind of I went back kind of into just the camera zone. And I think what's happening for me is I'm slowly working on building out from doing just the cameras. So with this review, I'm like, okay, let's challenge ourselves to talk about screen brightness. Let's challenge ourselves to talk more about battery life.
Right.
And slowly I'm going to build into something larger than just what I was doing at the Verge, but it's been a slow process. I think the hardest part about being a reviewer, being online, just being a person online in general, is like building up confidence. And I have a ton of confidence in all of the things I was doing at The Verge, and I have very little confidence in everything else, the broader spectrum of tech. And so I'm slowly entering into a more broad space. But the biggest difference I've noticed very quickly is I did put a lot of myself in my videos at The Verge, a lot of my life and my friends, but there was many times where I'd have to get like release forms for photos of my friends in the videos. And that release form says, hey, your image now belongs to Vox Media. And yes, when we upload content to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, part of our image now belongs to those companies. But on the back end, I would have to upload all of the footage I shot to Vox Media servers, which is like normal practice. That's like totally fine. But it kept me from like, I don't know, bringing my work more into my life. For example,
Okay.
I put out a video about an iPod. And in the beginning, you'll see footage of me as a child. And that came from an hour-long video of me as a kid, like playing. And that's something I would have never felt comfortable uploading to Vox Media servers. But if I wanted to use it in the video, like that would be in my project and ultimately would go on the server. And of course I could like delete it or clip out just what I wanted to use. But psychologically, I feel so much more free to put whatever I want into my videos now, because from top to bottom, they're mine. Like that project
Yeah.
is mine.
Right.
And so that's like the biggest difference. I kind of went on a tangent. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. You cannot answer my question poorly.
Oh, I
I'm trying to
can.
I'm trying to investigate this relationship that you have to technology, because what I find so fascinating about you and a lot of sort of other, I would say, like lifestyle tech creators, is that there's yes, you are in it, right? You're a character in these stories as well, but
Yeah.
you're decentralizing yourself in a way that allows people to come along with you, right? The
Yeah.
viewfinder is essentially your eyes. It's not you standing in front of a camera for 12 minutes with A-roll, and then you're cutting some B-roll on top of that single take, right? And I think a lot of
Yeah.
what people expect of YouTube, especially tech YouTube, is that, right? A modified version of B-roll overlaid on A-roll, or like a VO that is pretty static and pretty,
Yep.
I would say, commoditized. And
Yep.
your pitch to your new audience, or your audience that followed you over, is I'm taking tech outside, I'm doing this thing, I'm
Yep.
marrying sort of urban and rural in a lot of ways that I think people aspire to, right? If you live in Brooklyn or in Toronto or in any big city, you're like, yeah, I want to go to there. I want to be in a big
Yeah.
field taking photos of sunflowers, because that
Yeah.
is
It's the best.
the bucolic dream that everybody really wants and aspires to. So yeah, I mean, that balance is really, really fun, and I think is why people have been drawn to what you're doing.
Yeah. The marrying of like tech and lifestyle. There are some folks who have been doing it for a while, which is really cool. And then, like you said, the majority of tech YouTube is folks like sitting at home talking about a product. And to talk about like you said, you were talking about HTC, right? And when you joined, like getting to the product was the coolest thing. And I think that's because products used to be characters. They used to be really set characters, and they used to have
Yep.
characteristics, and they were all different, and the product that you had said something about you because of that product.
Hmm.
And now products are not so interesting as characters. Instead, it's about who's using them, which is really cool. And I love that. I love that we're moving to a space where it's more about like how that product fits into my life and I'm the character. And I just hope to amplify that. And so far, people seem to be on board, which is really cool. But you were talking about how you're a dad and how you brought your kid to a party, and you know, is it a boy or a girl, or who is your son or daughter?
My son is 2 and my
Your
daughter is
son. Okay.
6. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about your son coming to this party and him not being ready to play with the other kids. I'm fascinated by that. I want to hear more about that, and then maybe tell me about how maybe you used tech to solve it, or how you went online and read about somebody else. Like that's what I'm fascinated about, and I think a lot of other people are too, but more so than that. I think that generally tech isn't as naturally as exciting as it used to be,
Yeah.
which is makes me a little sad. But I don't think that makes it not exciting. I think it just gives us all an opportunity to tell more stories through it. And that's what I'm doing.
iPhone 16, this is I would say, an interesting product cycle for a lot of reasons, right? We're coming out of a relatively disappointing year for Samsung, and I really hope Samsung recovers its mojo next year to some extent. But I've said many
Yeah.
times on this show, like, as a photographer, I can't use a Samsung phone because they're terrible at capturing movement. And
Mm-hmm.
as great as it is for capturing sort of outdoor landscape stuff or static images, I just, as a parent of 2 young kids, like, I can't use a phone like that for anything reliably.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Pixels that just came out. I would argue Google had its best hardware cycle ever in
Yep.
2024. They
I'd
nailed it
agree.
on almost every single level, from design to execution to price to cameras, etc. And then Apple sort of at the tail end of this releases what I would say like the most confusing products it's ever released on the phone side, and even on the AirPods side, which I'm curious if we have time to hear your thoughts on. But
Yeah.
camera control, that like button appears to be quite controversial and divisive. And I'm wondering,
Mm-hmm.
how have you felt with all the software stuff that they've added, focusing on like, here's a new physical button that Apple added to its products this year, thinking that it's going to make, I mean, it's not a pro only feature, but it feels like it's aimed at people who take photography seriously. And yet, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's actually true. So, how have you picked up on that so far? And like, how did it impact your review?
Yeah. The camera control button has been tormenting me because I'm so, like, really, it really has. Because I'm so pro button. Like I love buttons. And as someone who comes from like, using film cameras, like I want all the dials and all the buttons and I want every control to be
Hmm.
separated. And so I wanted to love the camera control button, but I think that Apple tried to do too much too quickly with it. Like if they had just made it a button that opens the camera and takes a photo, which you can make it do, but just that, I think more folks maybe would use it. But the problem is, I find myself accidentally touching it all the time and then adjusting settings that I don't want to adjust, and then not being able to get back to other settings because it doesn't have a great slide. I don't even know how to properly say this, and I'm like in tech, but I'm always like over clicking and I can't get to the exact spot I want. It's just not very accurate, which makes me hate it. But I
Hmm.
think if it was just a button that opened to the camera and took photos, it'd be a
Yeah.
little bit better.
Like a
I,
two-stage
I,
shutter that doesn't do much else.
yeah, like I think, the feature that I've always loved on Android phones is like double tapping the, power button, and the camera opens. It's awesome. And then right next to that is the volume sliders, and that's the shutter. It's great. And I always wish Apple had that. And they gave me a button that I thought would be that, and yet it causes me many a headaches. How about you? Have you used it a lot?
I have. I've tried my best, and I think
That's the
I'm in the
line.
same boat. Yeah.
I tried my
I,
best.
I tried my best. It's too far up for landscape, and
Mm-hmm.
it's too far. It's like it's good for portrait, but I don't want to use it when I'm taking portrait photos. So it just feels like a waste of an opportunity. And then the thing that I always remember about Apple is, generally, there are a couple exceptions, when they make a decision about where something is or what something does, that thing doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
They've made the Apple Watch the same design for 10 years. The iPhone is the same design. They did like they changed the mute switch to an action button last year, but it's in the same spot. So my fear is that they've made this decision and the camera control button will be there for the next 10-15 years in the same spot. Whereas, and like they will improve the accuracy of the sensor and it'll do more and the UX might improve. But at the end of the day, if you are somebody who considers yourself a photographer and the physical shutter button is in the wrong spot on your Nikon or Canon or Fuji, you're screwed. Like you're not going to buy that thing, or
Yep.
you're just not going to use it. You're going to use something else to take a photo. So
Yeah.
that's my concern, is that like Apple's hubris will get in the way of them improving this product.
Yeah.
But that's not my problem. That's Apple's problem. And I'm just the guy who's going to be among the many complaining about it.
Love it. I love that peanut gallery. I am in it as well. Love to be loud complaining about a product, um, with no real solutions. Yeah, I worry about that as well. And I think if they put out another mini, which everyone says they're not going to, I feel like on the mini it would be in the perfect spot.
Hmm.
And it's like
Yeah.
one of those buttons where like I don't think the perfect spot is the same spot for every phone size. I haven't used it on a Max yet, a Pro Max.
Mm.
I don't know, maybe it's in a better spot on the Pro Max. But yeah, it's rough. It's really rough. I do think the feature that they teased, the like half press to like hold exposure and lock focus, amazing. When there's a good reason to use this camera control button, like really good, like I can
Hmm.
hold on, exposure and all that, I think maybe I'll use it more. And Apple is developing for it. They're hiring for development for this button, so we're gonna see some changes. I'm sure there'll be like some AI something or other coming to it. So time will tell on it. I'm not like giving up hope because I love buttons, and I just want more buttons. It's like a good example is there's film cameras coming out now, right? And they're not the best film cameras that have ever been made. But me, as a lover of film cameras, I want to support them because I want more of them. And
Hmm.
so I think a lot of like camera reviewers are having trouble with these film cameras because they're not the best film cameras we've ever used, but we so badly want more. And that's kind of how I feel about the action button. It's like I hate this thing, but I want a good button like this so bad that
Right.
I'm going to try to find a silver lining. So that's where I am with the action button.
Okay, I have a big question for you.
Oh no.
It's very philosophical, so hold on to your butt. There's,
Okay.
I think, you've talked about this. Your last video on your channel was a perfect example of there are cameras everywhere, right? Potatoes can take cameras, iPod Nanos can take can be cameras. There's a spectrum, I think, and we've reached the point where the best camera has been the one you've had in your pocket for years, but that's not really true anymore because now we have people with like old Canon Elfs that they're digging out of their mom's attics to try to use them again. I think the analog resurgence is happening with film cameras, with physical media in general. So the response from companies like Apple and Google have been to either reassert some sort of opinion about what their photos look like and really give you something that has shadows and it doesn't auto brighten, auto sharpen everything to 11 and like really kill the vibe of every photo you take. That's on the Pixel side a little bit. On the Apple side, they're letting you take over, right? If you just use the default settings, it'll still make everything look super bright and over sharp and there are no shadows, but I think the photographic styles allow you to get there. Then we have this proliferation of like Fuji X100 Mark 5 and 6 users that just want like a street level fixed lens camera that takes beautiful JPEGs every time. And then there are folks like yourself and David Amell and many, many, many others who are pushing for like, we want to make film cameras part of the zeitgeist again. We want this to be sort of a thing that is considered a piece of technology, the same way that something digital is. How do you feel that whole relationship and that like cycle is working? Like, do you think that the rise of film and like analog is circling back to inform Apple and Google about what they're doing on the camera side and making decisions on behalf of the users? Or do you think that the what Apple did this year by putting the power and the onus back on the user would have happened anyway because we've just sort of reached the digital cycle of people getting fed up with no shadows and over sharpening?
Yeah, I think it was inevitable. I mean, what I've seen in like the 7 years that I've been like taking all of these cameras out and taking all of the same photos and looking at them side by side is that all of these phone makers were just every year getting closer and closer to each other, to this like unified, here's what a phone can give you, and here's what we know people think is like the most pleasing. And so like everybody was kind of coming together, and now I feel like these companies are going to start to give us small options on either end to like pull us to their sides, like, and I think it will be like who can do that, who can make it the easiest for folks to make something slightly unique. I
Yeah.
think that's who like will win. The reason I think that analog is coming back is because it's like a relatively easy way to get something really different now. You know, we're all taking the same photos with our phones. But if you pick up a film camera, like you can pick up a really easy to use film camera and you get something that looks like really different. And so I think that's like a big reason why it's coming back. But I also think that naturally humans like to play and explore. And for a while, we were playing and exploring with phones, and then we got used to that. And now we're going to go play and explore with film cameras because, like, we haven't done that in a while, and that's going to feel new and exciting to us.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I think about all that. I think naturally this was going to happen. We just like options, we like choices, we like to try new things. And phones are no longer fun and exciting.
Do you always leave the house with a camera of some sort, or is it common for you to kind of just rely on your phone?
I always leave the house with what I'm reviewing because I'm
Okay.
always reviewing something. And if I'm reviewing like earbuds, like I'm leaving the house with like those earbuds. And
Yeah.
then when I'm like out and about, that's all I'm thinking about. But when I leave the house with like a camera, like then that's all I'm thinking about. But it kind of goes through cycles where it'll be like cameras for a while. And then I will be like, I'm done looking every day for photos. Now I'm going to go like listen every day. But yeah, I always go on vacation with cameras.
And I don't even know if I'm allowed to ask this of you, but like what is your daily driver if you have that? Of
For a
like you
camera,
go, yeah, like if you're going somewhere beautiful.
it's so tough. I have my like I have a Nikkermat that it's like a 1968 all metal film camera that is like my babe. I got
Mm,
it from Goodwill when I was in 10th grade for $8. And it has gone everywhere with me. And so that's kind of always my like I'm going to take this with me because this is literally how I see the world. Like this camera and I have the same eye. It is my companion. I travel alone a lot and I find cameras can be a great companion and it is like my favorite companion. So that's like my babe. But within the last like 3 years I've been trying to bring other cameras places and I don't really have like the one other than that camera. It kind of
mm,
depends on where I'm going. Yeah,
okay.
which is a rough answer. But I've also come to the point where I love bringing a camera. I love capturing the moment in that way. I love documenting my life. But I am starting to get to a point where I just want to experience it for myself now in a way that I never used to. Like, it used to be really important for me to like have a camera, but now it's becoming really important to like log off in all
Hmm.
ways. And so I've been challenging myself to like, what if I didn't bring anything with me? Which sounds crazy. But um, wait, but what about you? I would love to hear what you think about cameras and phones and them all. Like, do you think this was inevitable? Why do you think film cameras are coming back?
Um, I think I agree with you. I think that being around a lot of like early teenagers in my family has given me the perspective of there's a very concerted effort to try to feel like the internet is not your whole life because
Mm-hmm.
I mean I grew up without the internet and I got the internet when I was 11, 12 years old, but it didn't become ubiquitous until like 2001, 2002 for me when we got cable internet and it was always there. And then with BlackBerry, I don't know, I mean, I'm a Canadian, so like for me, it was BlackBerry. That was really the turning point where like I needed to have something tethered to me all the time. And
Yeah.
that it was still so novel. Whereas I think this generation is growing up where the novelty is flipped and not having access to technology is novel and
Yeah.
purposefully finding moments to not be online is novel and like fulfilling in a way that's almost aspirational, right? And because of
Yeah.
that I think companies like Apple and Google have obviously become aware of that while also acknowledging that software will eat the world and it has to eat the world, and like the commoditization of hardware and sensors has made it so that everything basically looks the same all the time, because there used to be a major difference between the quality of a sensor in like the most expensive iPhone or Pixel and the sensor in the shitty $300 Samsung phone, and that's really not true
Yep.
anymore.
Yep.
So they've decided to like just flatten everything with software in a way
Yep.
that is just, I think, unattractive to folks that are digital natives, because for me at least, like I look at that and go, oh, that's an amazing technological feat that you can brighten a room without doing anything, right? Like you add a bunch of frames together and you call it night mode, and
Mm-hmm.
this is like an accomplishment. But I also
Yep.
conversely see that room brightened artificially as being something that is not true, and that is an artifice in a way that like I don't necessarily want my memory of that situation to be tainted in some way by that artificiality. And I know that's a little bit extreme, right? Like
No, no,
if
no, no.
my wife is like reading a book to my son right before he goes to bed, and it's a dark room, and I take a photo of them because it's a cute moment, and night sight kicks in and it brightens the room, I'm not going to be like, oh, this photo, like I'll never see it again. But I also think it's not indicative of that moment. And when I see it later on, Google Photos might tell me night sight kicked in, but I'm like, as I get further and further from the actual event, I may not remember what that situation really was. And
Yeah.
that's why like what like the contrast between what Google said this year about what a photo is, which is like a memory, the thing that you wanted to happen, and Apple being like, this is the physical thing that you captured in the moment, and we wanted to give you the
Mm-hmm.
option of like tweaking it, but we don't want to undermine it, I think is the better choice. Even though I kind of understand Google's perspective, because we want to remember things better than they were, and they're giving us that option, right? But that's
Mm-hmm.
the default on the Google side. That's the like they think of that as like the intrinsic value of a photo, as the better example, the add me, where like all three friends are actually in the same photo. That's the platonic ideal, but it's not real. It's not the thing that happened. And I struggle with that, because I would have loved for all three of us to be in that photo together. But 10 years from now, because I have a bad memory, will I remember that we weren't actually in that photo together? Will it matter? Like, will I
Right.
call up Jeremy and be like, remember that photo of the three of us in front of the sign? And Jeremy, who's never going to forget anything in his life, going to be like, dude, we weren't in that photo together. Your freaking AI created that out of thin air. And, you know, I think that's weird. I think it's a weird reality that like this is just going to become more and more common.
Right. Yeah, you're not wrong, but I think the point of like, does it matter? Like, who does it matter to, and why does it matter? Is like more the question. I'm trying to find like the perfect analogy for this, because like what Google's doing is like giving you tools, right? And like you can use them or you don't have to. And so that's like, okay, you use that tool, like you consciously use that tool. And maybe when you used it, some friends had never heard it before. And then like your memory is like showing them this tool. But like if you look at it in 10 years, like maybe you'll remember that part about the tool. But like, I don't know, does it matter? Like it just comes back to like, does it matter to me? And like for me, it's like, I don't think that matters. Now, if we're like putting hot air balloons behind us and we're using like Google's like, prompting
Mm.
abilities, that matters to me. It's like, okay, there weren't hot air balloons there. That matters. Then you're making like art. You're not making a memory for me. Like that's how I
Hmm.
differentiate that. But I think all of these things are just like so Google can sell you on its camera, which you've always known that Pixels have great cameras, and like we need to keep up this like idea that we have a cool innovative camera. And so they just keep pumping it with these like weird tools that I'd be interested to see how many people actually use.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if there are that many people. I want to do the Android Police podcast thing for like 30 seconds and ask
Let's
you
go.
the practical question of between the Pixel 9 series and the iPhone 16 series, or at least the Pro, like which is your preferred camera this year and why?
Yeah. See, earlier you were like, I'm going to ask you a tough question. What's your daily camera carry? That's not that hard. This is the tough question. My preferred camera this year. Here's the thing. Like I was saying earlier, I think all of these cameras are so similar now that you can't go wrong in choosing one of them. Like you're gonna get great images from them. I think for me it comes down to what lens do you want to use. I think the iPhone has a superior main sensor. I think it takes actually slightly better photos at night. I've learned that I really do like photographic styles, and I like going in and editing, and I like how Apple has adapted that and made it more customizable. There is one photographic style that I always use, and I always put the slider in the same spot, but I can do that, and someone else can
Which
do
one is
whatever they
it?
want. I really like gold. I really like gold. I
Oh,
just go over to gold and then I slide that slider and the tone and everything right down to the bottom right hand corner every time.
bottom right. Okay, so you're
Except
upping the saturation as well, not just the tone.
upping the saturation, upping the contrast,
Yeah.
and creating a warmer image.
Hmm.
Unless I'm in like a stark white environment and then I just go to cool and make it like, super sterile,
Right.
pretty much.
That's funny. I use
But,
amber. I like gold, but I use
ooh,
amber.
see, but
I
look at this is like all Apple did not much to the camera, so we were forced to kind of dive into this new thing, and now we
hmm.
have something new to talk about. It's like working. Google tried to do it with AdMe. I haven't used it. I don't have much more to say about it. I have nothing to say about that camera, but I actually have a little bit more to say. I think the main sensor on the iPhone is great. I think the ultra wide is on the new iPhone 16 Pro is not good. It's not
Hmm.
good. It's like if you use it at night, it's literally like someone turned off all the lights. It's super dark. In great and perfect daylight, it's totally passable and fine. But I like my lenses to be used all the time. And if I can't use the ultra wide, which is a lens I use a lot at night, that's a big downer for me. So that Google wins over there. So a little 50-50 for me.
Okay. And then telephoto.
I know. I know. I don't have a super big opinion because they both do well. I think Apple slightly has the edge because I still find number one, zooming between lenses on the Pixel is like really bad. It's like very jarring, and
Yeah.
they just need to figure it out. And they tried to tell me that like, well, every camera is made a little bit differently, or like there's just things in manufacturing that we can't control. And I was like, that's not a good excuse. Like Apple's been doing this well for years. And when you use the telephoto for photos on the Pixel, it can still be hard to like control the lens because it's trying to steady it so much that you kind of have to fight it to move it slightly. And so Apple just has better control over their telephoto. So I guess 2 out of 3 for Apple. So I guess that would mean that Apple's my pick, but I'm a big
I
ultra
mean,
wide user as well.
it's funny. I haven't used the ultra wide on either phone very much. Except for the
Hmm.
macro, but I find
Yeah.
myself primarily using the telephoto to take portraits, like non-portrait mode photos of my kids. And I
Yeah.
prefer the Pixel for that. I think it's a sharper
Interesting.
lens.
It's faster, like you said you need.
It is faster. It's a sharper lens, and I just think it's more reliable in general than
Yeah.
once you're on it. The thing about the iPhone that I find is it's still, if the light is not good, and this is better on the 16, but if the light's not good enough, it will digitally crop the main sensor more often than Google's because it's a
Yes.
smaller sensor. And I'm like, I don't want to negotiate with this all the time. I don't want to have to like try to trick it into using that. Like, I'm okay with noise. Give me noise. Just
Yep.
let me use that lens reliably. And Apple's like, nope, we're fine. Like you can crop it.
I agree with you. And it's noticeable when it does it. It's like not supposed to be noticeable and it's very noticeable.
It is extremely obviously it's noticeable. It's you're
Yeah.
cropping in a significant amount into the sensor. Like, come on. I have a couple of questions that I would love to hear your take on, just about your sort of approach to content creation right now. So you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier you're trying new things, right? You're not just focusing on cameras, not just focusing on earbuds. You're trying to do a bit more like holistically about the products. But
Yeah.
long term, what do you want out of your channel? I mean, taking tech outside is wonderful, and I think is an admirable thing. You know, people want to see Becca in the snow, they want to see Becca in the rain, they want to see whatever, right? Like it's
I
gonna
want to
be
see Becca
great.
in the snow too.
I'm sure.
The next season is always my favorite season, so I'm like so ready for winter.
So, what does that look like when you're independent, right? How do you
Yeah.
plan out your next 6 months of content?
Oh man, I don't have a good answer for this. Like I always tell people the room is messy, but I know where everything is, and that's how I deal with so much of my life. Like I don't have fancy task apps. I don't have like I have my content planned out for like the next 4 weeks, and then after that it's like, well, I'll see what hits me. It's not good, but it's just kind of how I work. I currently don't have like the 5-year plan because the plan right now is to get this thing that's my own working. Like that's
Hmm.
all I care about right now. And when that gets working, then I can think about, okay, where do I want to take it? But right now I just need to figure out how to make, which is this is the hardest part for me, is like make a business out of doing what I love. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. And I don't have a huge plan. The whole idea with like taking tech outside is that I really want to reach my like long-term goal there is to reach more people. Like I want to meet more people and I want to see more places. And
Hmm.
because I think that tech affects us all differently. Like if you live in a city and you use a smartphone, like everybody does, you use it wildly differently than you do if you live in the middle of nowhere. And I know that because I've used smartphones in both places. Like I am on Google Maps heavily when I'm in the city. I am like navigating. I need noise cancellation. Like the needs are just different. When I'm, up in the middle of nowhere, it's like I know where everything is because there's 2 roads. And I'm either going to go down one or the other. And I don't need noise cancellation really because there's not much noise. And so I want to start reaching into like different pockets of the world and seeing how they're using tech differently. That's my kind of big ethos at the moment. So
I think that's beautiful, because we don't get a lot of that second one on YouTube. We don't get a lot of.
yeah,
It's not even about like reaching rural people. It's not like I want to appeal to YouTube watchers in West Virginia. It's more about like
yeah,
I want a quieter version of the thing that I get, and the thing that I'm used to. And
yeah,
I don't know, maybe it's just me getting older, but like that's what I want to consume. Like I want a quieter voice in my head. I want like the cozy side of tech in a way that like I don't think really exists yet, because
yeah,
for so many years tech has been extremely male and extremely loud and like very much born of like the droid sound that like infected all of us in 2009.
Oh my God. It's playing over and over again in my head right now. And actually, I miss it. I'm like having a moment where I'm like, oh God, I got to go listen to that after this.
I mean, some of those
Jules,
early.
can you put that in? Can you put that in right here so everybody can hear it?
And we'll get a copyright strike on the channel because we use the droid sound during the podcast.
No. We just have to talk about it a lot. We have to like, I learned a lot about copyright at Vox. If we just like, fair use because we're talking about
Oh,
it and try to
interesting.
get
All right, so we'll insert 20-minute AI segment of Verizon and Android, and we'll be okay.
yeah, perfect.
Um,
Okay,
okay,
so you want the quieter.
I want the quieter, and I worry that there's this interesting contrast right now that I'm seeing between folks that want to simplify and go minimal and strip out all of the excess in what they're doing, whether it's creating music, creating movies, creating anything. And then there's the AI infused side of it, which is using generative tools to just create more, right? To just put more crap both into the work you're creating and into other work that is just going to exist in this sort of miasma of garbage on the internet that is somehow you're either going to see it and ignore it or decide to watch it or whatever.
Tell us how you really feel about it.
I mean, it's chum for a reason, right? And it's just,
Yeah.
I'd love to know how you feel about, and we talked a little bit about AI, but you know, Google's really pushing this. Apple is coming out with Apple Intelligence. It hasn't really done much on the generative side for photos and videos, but I'm sure that will come later. Do you ever see yourself sort of trying to find a balance between analog and generative? Like, could you see yourself ever taking a negative that you used to create like an image from a still camera and like messing with it in some form digitally using AI? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just like two ends of the extreme, but
Yeah.
would that be interesting to you as somebody who creates art?
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, if we're talking at large about AI, we made the internet and we've made phones and we've made all of this tech. And I believe that all of these things are just tools. And we're just going to keep seeing the diversification of that tool. Like, someone invented a hammer and it was just a hammer, and you use that one hammer to do everything at one point in time. And now there's so many different types of hammers for all different types of jobs and work. And I think that's just what we're seeing. You're going to just see all these different tech tools that are used for different jobs. And I think that's cool. And that should keep happening. When it comes to AI specifically, right now, there are some uses of it that I find very helpful and some I do not. And I'm trying to figure out for myself what I like to use. One that is very helpful. I use a program that takes out background noise in my videos and makes my microphone sound better. I love that. Very useful, very helpful. I use it all the time. I have paid for it. It is a part of my workflow. Things that aren't so helpful. AI image generation. I use it all the time because I love it, because it's fun. Not very helpful for me, not crucial to any part of my process, but something I just love to like play with and tinker with. And I think that's just going to be the case, is we're all going to find different AI tools that are helpful for us and some aren't going to be. And right now companies are also trying to figure out what the most amount of people are going to find helpful. And I just think that
Yeah.
that's where we're at. And as someone who likes to like make stuff and tinker, I would totally take my negative and put it into an AI project just to see what happens. But I'm just curious like that. And I don't think it's necessary, but it might be fun. I should try it. I can't wait, actually. I will try it.
That
What
is
about you?
the most optimistic response to that question I could have imagined, which is
Yeah. I mean, there's negatives too. I'm just a silver linings person by nature.
you are, and I think that's very much why people enjoy spending time with you, is because you exude that, you're not like loud about it, but you exude an optimism that is, I think, quite infectious. And
Thank you. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, we are here and we can choose every morning. Well, kind of choose if we want to like choose the optimistic or pessimistic side. And I just naturally choose optimism. So, but tell me about how you feel about AI.
I'm largely of the same opinion in that I want it to be a tool for good. I think the
Yeah.
problem is that it is being commercialized too quickly, and
Yes.
therefore it is being diluted too quickly. So
Yeah.
as a result, it is losing any semblance of cohesion that like the companies that could have been very focused with it. Google had the biggest opportunity and has failed the most at this, where
Yes.
it had an opportunity to be like, here are four things AI does brilliantly, and we want these to be perfect and really just like give you something substantive to look at and be like, this is a thing that works for me every day. But instead, they are spraying and praying, hoping that either some written or image related or video related or workspace related or chatbot related or some or search related thing is interesting to some amount of its user base, and this is just like losing the plot in the process. And then like the other side of it is Apple's being a lot more careful about it, but because it's being so careful about it, it has, I think, undermined a lot of what could be quite interesting. It's shaved off the edges already, even before it's launched. And I don't want to speak to something that I haven't used before, but given the fact that like the company has decided to take this very holistic approach to it, I'm a little bit more cautiously optimistic about its implementation in iOS, but not as much as I would be if it, again, had done 3 or 4 things really, really well. And I think ChatGPT, in that it's just an open-ended generative tool that is kind of like customizable to whatever you need, I think is the best example of what we can do with it, even though it's too open-ended to some extent, and I rarely use it because I don't really know where to begin with it. But I've spoken to a lot of people that have used and have implemented AI regularly into their workflows and love it. So I don't hold it against anybody, but I do think the commercialization of it happened too quickly and has, yeah, undermined a lot of its potential early on. So
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that it's just like the next thing they're going to sell us, right? So it's like, who can sell it to us first? Who can like start making money off of it first? Yeah. I mean, it also, like you said, it's too quick. And I think it's also too quick to like judge it. It's so early. It's everywhere, quote unquote. So time will tell, you know? I do think there are some folks that like it is going to take like jobs away in a big way. And it's not like replacing those jobs for those people. And I think that's something I worry about for some people. I talked about the audio one that I use. That's me not hiring an audio engineer. That's me not using somebody to do that for me. And sometimes that worries me and that scares me. And I like to think that we all are going to have to like have our own AI ethics because clearly the companies won't. And something I like to tell myself is like, okay, well, if a person can do it, I'm going to hire a person to do it. But then I went and bought this audio program, right? And so I think it's really going to be on us to decide how much of this we want to use and where our ethics lie. And that scares me almost more than whatever the companies do with it.
I want to end the show asking you something completely non-tech related. So I think Jules
Love.
warned you early when we were talking about getting you on the show. I like to end the show about something that you love.
Yeah.
I stole this segment from a podcast that I love called Pop Culture Happy Hour, and it's a segment that they do every couple of weeks called What's Making Us Happy, where it doesn't have to be anything related to what they're talking about. So Becca, what's making you happy right now?
Yeah. I love hiking and I love being outside. And where I live doesn't have cell service. And every night I go out on a long walk, and there's like really only 3 directions you can walk. And so every night I kind of go a different direction. And what makes me happy right now is like we're seeing like so much change in foliage and in what's growing and in what we're all wearing. I see a few of my neighbors every day, and that brings me so much joy to be so connected to the earth. I got really into foraging in the spring, and so it's been cool to like forage different things in different seasons. So yeah, it's been that
Tell
brings
me more
me.
about that. What do you forage? I assume it's mushrooms, but what other things do you forage?
No, I'm really afraid of foraging mushrooms. I have like a deep fear. So I only do chicken of the woods because it's super easy.
Yeah.
So that's the only one I forage. But otherwise, like in the spring, it's a lot of like dandelion leaves. And then you start to get into like berries, like really easy stuff. I'm like 101. Like so much so that like garlic mustard, I think it's called, was like something I was foraging a lot. And that's like literally foraging 101. That was in the spring. But then it's been a great season for apples, like a really good season for apples, because last season was quite poor. We had a really late frost in May. And so I've just been foraging so many wild apples, and they all taste so different. And it's just incredible that you can pull something off of a tree that is so crunchy and sweet and delicious.
Mhm.
And yeah, I eat like a lot of them on my walks, a lot of them. And then there's a pear tree too that's been so good, but they're finally to the point where I can't reach them anymore, even with jumping. And so I had to stop with the pear tree.
You got to
So
you
that's
got to bring your own chair or something to get up on those
Yeah, my
ledges.
neighbor Mark, who lives nearby, I was like, "Yo, Mark, do you have a ladder?" Because he was like out playing his guitar, but he couldn't dig one up quickly, and so then I was like, "All right, I'm not gonna, Becca, don't bring a ladder to your neighbor's tree." You know what I mean? So
I hear you. Do you fish? Is that a
yeah.
thing?
I grew up fishing with my dad, and I really want to get into fly fishing because that's really big where I live. But I need to take a class, and then I need to like buy rods and like waders, and so that's a long term goal. But right now, I am not fishing. No,
Okay.
but
All
someday,
right.
someday
Maybe
real
next
soon.
time.
Yeah,
By next year, you'll have taken up fly
yeah.
fishing.
Well, you'll see it in a video for sure. If I do it, that's that's gonna be a video in some way. So
I I
yeah.
have
What about?
I have so many more questions about your process because one of the things that I love and I can't ask them today. So I'm gonna ask for your commitment to come back if you're willing
Yeah,
because
of course.
I I think one of the like picturing you trying to set up the shot for you wading out into a lake doing fly fishing brings me
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of joy.
Okay, so here's the deal. If I take up fly fishing, which I don't know if it'll be next year, this might be a 2 year thing because
Okay,
it seems monumental. If I take up fly fishing and I make a video about it, I will come back here and tell you all about how I did it.
amazing.
But
I
I
love
also
it.
will come back before then. I could talk tech and nerd out and talk about life, and I also would like to say you're such a great storyteller. I've learned so much naturally in talking about tech, about you, and I think that's beautiful and wonderful. And
Well,
I'm
thank you.
stoked to hear all the stories that you tell. And this was just so fun. So, oh
Um,
wait, what makes
for,
you happy?
okay, I have a book recommendation, and then I want to tell our very brief origin story, and then we'll and then we'll get to the end of the show. So I just
Okay.
finished what I think will end up being my favorite book of the year. So for people who listen to the show, they know that I read all the time. It's like so my wife when she was pregnant with our son decided that she would take up reading much more like assiduously than she had been, which was like, I'll just pick up a book every once in a while. It was like, no, I'm pregnant. I can't leave the house very much, or I'm going to go and like read. So she started reading, and then 2022 she read like 40 books, and meanwhile I read like
Wow,
six
nice.
because I couldn't focus. It was the pandemic. I couldn't do it. Everybody was broken. So she started reading and she inspired me. Uh, she read like 50 books in 2023. And then I read 11. And then 2024 came around and I went on Goodreads and I was like, what's a good number? 60. So I was like, I'll read 60 books this year.
Whoa, that's
So
quite a jump from the year before.
so I was like, all right, I'm going to do this because when I do something, I want to do it right. So I started reading and I just could not stop. I've read now 72 books this year so far. And thank you. And
It's
anyway, I just
awesome.
finished this book. It's called Martyr by a guy named Kaveh Akbar. And it is one of the most beautiful, challenging, exciting novels that I've read in a long time. Like I've read a lot of great books this year. This one is incredible. Akbar is a poet. He's never written a novel. This was his first novel. And basically, the story is about an Iranian American who comes to the US when he's really young. And it's just him and his dad. His mom has tragically died in a famous real plane crash where a US missile cruiser mistakenly shot down an Iranian aircraft in 1988, and they thought that it was an air fighter. They got the radar signals wrong, and this novel kind of pretends that this guy Cyrus's mom was on that plane, and like, what are the implications for his life knowing that he's got this mom who died so tragically. Growing up in the US, he goes to university, he starts drinking, he starts taking drugs. None of this is a spoiler. This all happens very early on, but the plot is not the point of this book. It is just a gorgeous lamentation on life and how to find meaning in our lives, and whether a good death is something that can bring purpose to a life. And I think what's so beautiful about this is that it upends this idea of a martyr, right? Since 9/11, we've often heard about martyrs in relation to terrorism. And the idea, the original like Quran-based martyr is not somebody who does something awful to other people in order to achieve notoriety. It's somebody who dies with meaning, right? And I love this theme, and I love this book, and I think it's essential reading for anybody who is interested in kind of exploring that part of it, right? These like broken people who still want to do good things. So I read it, I loved it. I'd highly recommend it if anybody's interested. So yeah, that's what's making me happy this week.
That's amazing. And you finished it, yeah?
Oh yeah, I finished it. I wanted to start it again. Like, it's one of those few books that you finish and you're like, oh, I want to read this again right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I know I am not the biggest reader, but my partner is a book editor, which
Oh,
is
wow.
funny. Yeah, because when we started dating, my mom and my sister were like, "Does she know that you don't read?" So I've gotten more into the book space, but that sounds beautiful, like a
Audiobooks,
beautiful
Becca.
story.
Audiobooks.
Yeah, okay.
That's the start. I'm telling you.
Yeah, if I had like $1 for every person that told me audiobooks is the answer, I could buy a lot of audiobooks. But no, you're right. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I have begun reading, and I found out that I am just a nonfiction reader.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is just my vibe. And I just finished Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights,
Cool.
which I actually really really enjoyed. So yeah, I have to find my next book.
Did you read it in
Maybe
his
it's smarter.
voice?
Um, it happens. It happens sometimes naturally, but not consciously. I was not. No. Although I think he does his audiobook.
He
So that would
definitely
be a
does.
good
I
one.
mean, I assume he did his own
Sure.
audiobook. He's got a voice that everybody knows. So it would be funny if like
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman did his audiobook just for shits and giggles.
Well, AI could do that for us.
Oh god. the one like good aspect of AI. All right, I'm gonna end the show. I'll tell everybody, Becca and I first met very briefly outside a OnePlus event at CES 2020. This was the last CES ever, because I just don't consider new CES to be real. But it was January
like it was.
2020. OnePlus had been teasing this weird concept phone where it had electromagnetic glass that allowed you to hide the cameras on the back, in partnership with McLaren. You should look this up. It's called the OnePlus Concept One, and it had this like really beautiful exposed stitching, and it was like really nice leather with a McLaren papaya colorway, and yeah, it had this like experimental electromagnetic thing on the back, and it had
the pop-up selfie camera too.
the
which
pop-up
was
selfie
like
camera,
seeming
right?
like that was going to be the future at that time.
Oh my god, I remember. And then Becca, do you remember the piano that they had set up with OnePlus phones on it?
Yes, I do. I only remembered that after watching your video, because I had to remember that weird room that we were in. It was like an oddly small room.
It was very
but
cramped.
yes, I do.
Probably not great for the amount of COVID that we didn't know was at CES that year. Just saying. So.
Yeah, what a wild time. It was really like, we didn't know it was the end of times, but it was really the end of times.
It was the beginning of the end of times, or the end of the beginning of times. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, that was it. I can't believe it.
Thank you so much for being here. It has been my absolute
Yeah.
pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, back at you. This was so fun. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Just so happy to be here. So yeah, and we're doing this again. It's not goodbye. It's see you
Definitely.
down the trail.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Once you're a professional fly fisher person, you'll come back.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. This is the
I'm going
future
to hold
for
you
me.
to it.
Please. I don't tell people every time I'm going to try something new because then like you're really stuck to it.
Mhm.
But I've begun telling people about this, which means that like it's going to happen now. So
All right. I want people to send in your feedback, podcast at androidpolice.com. I noticed that Becca's wearing the new mint colored Pixel Buds Pro 2. Also my choice. I have them somewhere behind me. And I will grill you maybe separately for something else about your thoughts on these things because I have
some
them.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not about them.
Yeah.
Teaser.
Yeah. Oh, that's a teaser. Okay. All right. Good. All right. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back. We'll be back next week, and somebody's honking to get back off the show. So we'll pick it up there. All right. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.